Hey, what's up, guys? Thanks for checking out American Made. Today, we have a returning guest, Gary Clemente. And if you haven't watched the videos that Gary and I have done, the part one and part two about his father, Peter Clemente, and his career in the FBI encourage you to go back and watch those videos. But Gary himself is a very interesting person. He has a lot of knowledge about a lot of different things, and I think you'll see that in today's show. But Gary, how are you doing, man? Thanks for coming back on the channel.
I'm doing great, Jesse. Thank you for having me back.
Yes,
I missed
sir.
you.
Well, Gary,
Yeah.
we've talked about several topics that we wanted to discuss on here, and one of them really stood out to me, especially with me being a content creator in this genre, in the mob genre. And that is a question that I often think about, and I've asked before, which is why is there a public fascination with the Italian mafia? And then how did that fascination translate into pop culture with mob movies and TV shows? I know this is something that you've thought about, and just so people know, you've actually worked in Hollywood, in the movie industry. So I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts on this and sharing them with everyone watching.
Yes, that's true, Jesse. But as you know, my father was in the FBI for over 26 years, and his wheelhouse was investigating organized crime, and in particular the mafia, because he was Sicilian himself. And he was part of the elite top hoodlum squad in New York. So what we are going to talk about today is related to the mafia, the mob, and also the mob movies that it spawned. I think certainly something interesting to talk about. Uh, I, to give you viewers a little entree into the background of the mafia. The mafia originated in Sicily in the 1800s, and it was a powerful, very powerful force in that country's history. Even 100 years later, after controlling much of the economy and the politics of Sicily, 100 years later, the late 20th century, they had people, mafia members that were arrested and being tried in court, and they were so dangerous. They had been killing judges, shooting them and car bombing them. They had them in cages in the courtroom, and they had military people all over the place, armed to the teeth to protect not only the people in the courtroom, but the judges themselves. So the mafia in Sicily was is a large part of their history, and but the thing to understand about the mafia, whether it's in Sicily or the United States, is that the mafia destabilizes a society through the corruption that it breeds, the violence, all of that. Yes, we tend to sometimes glorify the mob and make it look at and appear as being something that it really isn't. But we should understand how dangerous these people are.
There was a piece of legislation that led to what became the glorification of these gangsters. Can you discuss that a little bit?
Well, a turning point of all of the glorification of gangsterism back in the early part of the 20th century happened in 1919 with the Volstead Act. What was the Volstead Act? The Volstead Act was prohibition. It was banning outlawing alcohol, and as a result of that, people wanted out. They wanted their alcohol, and bootleggers proliferated, and they were pushing their booze and selling their booze to everybody. And what people don't realize, they don't remember, is that before Prohibition happened, the reason that Prohibition happened was because alcoholism was so rampant in the United States in the early part of the 20th century to the point where many men, especially, were coming home drunk, being disorderly in public. They were abusing and being violent with their wives and their children. So there were many, many women that actually protested the how alcohol was just ruining American society at that time. So that was a big reason for prohibition. But the offshoot of all of that of prohibition was the fact that it allowed organized crime or criminality in the United States to grow through the use of bootlegging and moonshining and all of this business. If you recall, the Kennedy family, Joseph Kennedy, the patriarch of the Kennedy family, Joseph Kennedy made all of his money bootlegging alcohol. That's how the Kennedys became so rich. So the use of alcohol and the proliferation of organized crime and gangsterism had a lot to do with prohibition.
That's interesting that it was Prohibition that really started this image of gangsters. How did they maintain this image after Prohibition ended?
Well, what happened was that after it ended, interestingly enough, let's put it this way: the gangsters at that time that were going against prohibition, that were fighting it, that were proliferating as bootleggers and supplying people what they wanted with their alcohol. They were looked upon as being people that were thumbing their nose at the law, and they were doing what the public wanted. So after prohibition ended, the goodwill, that sort of image that they had stuck, and people didn't forget about that. So that really helped the image of gangsterism at the time. I say gangsterism because this is really before the Italian mafia really became interplay and came to the forefront. Now, the Italian mafia at that time with people like Lucky Luciano, those people, yes, they were bootlegging and making a lot of money with the alcohol trade, but people weren't quite so sure at that time who this murky thing called the mafia was.
That's interesting. Why even today is the Italian mafia members treated, more like celebrities rather than criminals or monsters in some cases? Why do you think that is?
Well, that's an interesting question. It's really about how the fascination of the Italian mafia came into being. There were a number of reasons for it. A lot of it has to do with human psychology and the human condition. Mobsters, as bad and brutal as they can be, they're still human beings like you and I. They have the same basic love and fear instincts that we all have. We all want to be loved and accepted, and including mobsters, right? We all
Right.
have a fear of our own mortality. Mobsters don't want to be hung up on a meat hook because they withheld the boss's cash any more than you or I would like to be. So
Right.
yes, we understand them as fellow human beings. They have the same frailties as the rest of us. It's all a part of the human condition, which they're a part of, rightfully or wrongfully so. And then there's the fascination that we as human beings have with danger and our own mortality. We have an attraction. Think about this. We have an attraction with lions and tigers and bears, right? Because they're dangerous. So
Right.
what we do is we go to the zoo to look at them because we're fascinated with them. It's the same thing with gangsters and mobsters. Well, the difference is that there are bars that keep us from these dangerous predators like lions and tigers and bears, but there are prison bars that keep us between these mobsters, and metaphorically so. So what happens, Jesse, is we create two entities. We create a real mob, a real mafia in our minds, and what I would call a Robin Hood mafia.
Yeah, so maybe you could expand on that a little bit. You mentioned there are two types of mafias, two separate mafias. What do you mean by that exactly?
Well, I mentioned there's a real mafia. The real mafia is the mafia that we all know about. And in reality, we understand that they kill, they maim, they murder. They're extremely brutal. They will eat us alive if we get closely involved with them. And like the lions and the tigers and the bears at the zoo, we're still visually attracted to how alluring they appear, right? The mobsters they've got shark skin suits, they've got Italian loafers, they've got a big broccoli wad of cash, but we keep our distance from them, making ourselves believe that they won't be a danger to us if we don't participate in their crimes and that they only kill each other. So we don't worry about that so much. The other mafia is the fictitious mafia that we keep in our heads. It's the Robin Hood mafia, right? It's the other separate mafia that holds our fascination like that. It keeps us in touch with them with a certain amount of social distance. If you want to use that term, social
Yeah.
distance that you have with the Robin Hood Mafia. Now, this they may not steal from the rich and give to the poor in exactly that formula, but they take from the politicians by corrupting them through their payoffs, thereby exposing them as hypocrites, right? They're giving back to the average citizen the satisfaction that these politicians and government people that always try to regulate our lives with unjust laws, they're no better than anybody else because they're morally bankrupt to begin with, right? So that's all part of the equation.
Yeah, that's a good comparison with Robin Hood because I think many people think of the mafia in that way. And one thing about us in America, we love an anti-hero, and there's just something about that type of individual that we can relate to.
Exactly, exactly. And because of that, the mafia looked upon it. They were looked upon as people, boosting the cause of the individual. This is important to understand. The mob members, these gangsters, come across as being individuals. Well, that's a part of the fabric of American life, is individual freedom. And they see these people as championing the cause of individual freedom. All of that is spelled out by the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. It's a part of American life. It's a part of Americana that we love individual freedom. That's what makes America America. And these people, these gangsters, well, they look as American as anybody else, don't they? So this business about Americans really loving individual freedom really dovetails into the pioneering of the American West and the admiration that we have for free-spirited cowboys, gunslingers, heroes like Wyatt Earp and Buffalo Bill. That's all about unleashing individual freedom. So when the mob and all these maverick gangsters come along in the 20th century, they're viewed as vigilantes, fighting unjust laws. Then Chicago and New York come along with all of these gangland killings, and so what we have then, instead of the Wild West, we have the Wild East. So there are a lot of similarities to it. Murder Incorporated instead of Jesse James and the Clanton Gang. And we've got Al Capone staking his claim as opposed to Billy the Kid. So
Right.
there are a lot of similarities to what happened in the old West, the Wild West, and in the Wild East, as far as I can see it.
Yeah, yeah, I like that comparison, and it's true. I mean, The Godfather and gangster movies have kind of taken the place of like westerns and cowboy movies.
Exactly, and then subsequently, what happened is, Jesse, there's what develops is this mythical chivalrous mob or mafia, where they have a code of gallantry and honor. It's called omerta. that holds everything together. And we admire that sort of integrity that we can't find anywhere else, right? We admire people that have integrity like that.
Right.
They thumb their nose at the law, which is part of the government and the morally bankrupt politicians that control that power structure. So there's a reason why a mafia gang is called a family, La Familia. It's because that's what it is. It's more than just a loose knit group of thugs. It's a community within the neighborhoods they live in. They don't live in ivory towers. They're accessible and they're visible on the street. Yet dangerous, yes, as they walk by you, but they greet little old ladies. They put money in the poor box at church. They build baseball fields for the kids, and they protect their neighborhoods from crime that they don't approve of, which is kind of ironic because they're pretty heavy on crime themselves, right?
Right.
So a lot of that is sort of a dichotomy there that has a lot of interesting aspects to it. A lot of similarities, but we sort of separate. We try to separate things by distancing ourselves from the reality of something and creating a myth about these people. And that's all part of it.
Right. Yeah, I think there are many people that feel the mafia is a force for good in the neighborhood, and in some cases that may be true. Some of the things that you just mentioned, keeping certain crimes out of the neighborhood, but I think the average person thinks that whatever goes on in and around the mafia, it doesn't have an effect on them, and we know in a lot of cases that's not true when it comes to the meat prices or the garment prices. The mafia has an effect on the neighborhood, whether they realize it or not.
Well, exactly. Well, by and large, Jesse, people are under the impression that if they don't have any dealings with the mob directly, they don't have any dealings with their drugs, their loan sharking, their illegal gambling. They have nothing to fear from organized crime because look but don't touch sort of thing because their violence seems directed at themselves and not so much us. They kill each other, and so we tend to think, well, some people tend to think, well, they kill each other. Well, why don't we just let them kill each other? And we don't have to worry about anything. Well, I asked my father that very question when I was very young. Was I said, hey, Dad, I hear that people say, why don't we just let them kill each other? Then we don't have to worry about it. He said, well, let me tell you something. If we allow them to kill each other, what's to keep them from killing you or
Exactly.
anybody else? So
Yeah.
that's an important point.
Yeah. And the
I don't want
problem,
them killing me.
exactly. And the problem with that is that doesn't, they don't always just stick to killing one another. Innocent people, get caught up in this from time to time. And I can think of two or three examples of that where just innocent people get mistaken for somebody or get in the crosshairs or get it. So that can happen. So, when it comes to just let them shoot one another, it doesn't always go like that.
Exactly. Well, and the other thing too is even if they kill each other, they become the judge, jury, and executioner. And a lot of these people within their life don't get a fair shot. They don't get a fair trial,
Mm-hmm.
and so-called the so-called innocent mobsters have been killed just for the slightest little thing. Maybe they catch. My dad would talk about maybe they'll catch they'll catch another made guy talking with a law enforcement official down the end of the street or something, or at a restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then they start to spread rumors and gossip, and the next thing you know, this guy he's dead, and he didn't do anything wrong. Maybe he didn't tell it. He didn't tell the law enforcement person anything to begin with. So that's why these people are extremely dangerous. And I was going to tell you that there is there was a big change on how we're talking about the image of the mafia. There was a big change that happened that really changed all of our views of how we look at the mafia. There was one man that, in my opinion, affected a sea change of how we view, especially the Italian mafia. And that man was Mario Puzo, who wrote the Godfather book in
Mhm.
1969. And it was a tectonic plate shift on how people come to view the mafia because he romanticized it like it had never been done before. He created this irresistible Robin Hood mystique that you couldn't get enough of. It was Puzo who showed you how these passionate, animated Italians with such a captivating sense of honor, humor, style, and flair, how they could be so much more captivating than other ethnic gangs like the Irish, the Russians, the Jews, and the Chinese even. How they could be more captivating and more interesting to look at than than those people, and it had a lot to do with oh gosh, it made us think about, hey, could we get away with murder just like those guys did? And can we do it in a plausible manner, like Michael Corleone did with the police lieutenant when he shot him dead in the restaurant, and then he fled to Sicily? Could we actually do that? Because those guys make it look really cool, don't they?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good point, and the way you break that down, it's a good point. It's really interesting. I've often, like I mentioned earlier, I've thought this. Uh, I make mob content, mob content, and I've often thought, why is it that people just can't get enough of the mafia, the Italian mafia, and so that's interesting. And we've discussed the public's fascination with the Italian mafia. I want to get into how that translated into pop culture with mob movies and TV shows. Can we talk about some gangster and mafia movies?
Yes, because of Puzo, um, the Godfather movie was made in 1972. And I'll tell you, when I went to see that movie in 1972, um, it was an insanely popular book. It was like the Gone with the Wind of his age. And I remember going to the movie theater and watching this film. And when it was done, I walked out and I'm walking with everybody out, and I was very proud. I was very proud to be uh, an Italian American, a young Italian American. And it had nothing to do with mobsterism or being in the mafia, being a brutal person. It had nothing to do with that because Puzo presented these people as being very human. He presented a family of people that were no better than the politicians that the Godfather talked about. The Godfather said that you can do more with as an attorney with a briefcase than you can with 100 men with guns. So
Right.
that was the message that the film was putting out. So I was very proud, and I've come up with a list. I've come up with a list of the best the top 8 Italian mafia movies that I think, in my view, are the best. But I have some other. Before I do that, there's some others I wanted to run by you. First of all, Jesse, these movies would not have come about unless we had the old black and white movies, right? Remember them?
Or
We're talking about
yeah.
Jimmy Cagney. We're
Hmm.
talking about Edward G. Robinson, White Heat, Jimmy Cagney, The Public Enemy, Angels with Dirty Faces, The Roaring Twenties. These were all Jimmy Cagney movies, and he played gangsters in them. And people couldn't get enough of it back then. It was about mafia, it was about gangsters.
Hmm.
And interestingly enough, because of all these gangster movies that were being made, they pressured Hollywood into making something more positive instead of glorifying gangster movies because everybody's getting shot in these things. So therefore, it was Jimmy Cagney who did the movie G-Man about the FBI, making
Right.
him look to be a good guy as part of the law enforcement establishment. So those are those are some of the best of the old movies, and I think, in my opinion, before I forget, On the Waterfront, I think was the best black and white gangster mob movie of that era. It had Marlon Brando, it had Lee J. Cobb, Rod Steiger, Carl Malden. It was a killer cast, no pun intended.
One thing I wanted to mention, you mentioned G-Man, and that movie really played a big part in your father's story, and we discussed that in the part one and the part two videos we previously did before. That played a big part in your father deciding to go into law enforcement. So I just wanted to throw that in there. And
Well, that's exactly right. My dad, Pop was about maybe 13 or 14 years old in 1935 when he went to the movie theater and he watched Jimmy Cagney G-Man. He was so inspired by that. He said, I remember him telling me it's just that was my crusade from then on. I wanted to be in law enforcement. I wanted to be a G-Man. I wanted to be in the FBI like Jimmy Cagney. So yes, that was a defining moment in his life at that time.
right. Hey, what's up, guys? I wanted to take a second to remind you, please hit that subscribe button. And if you'd like to support the channel, you can do that via Cash App at American Made Channel. Now, let's get back to the video. Okay.
We talked about Italian mafia movies. Now we have a lot of movies that were really good that weren't Italian mafia movies, but they were mafia of a different ethnic form. To me, uh, the best Russian mob movies are the John Wick series movies. To me, those are the really top notch. Also, Eastern Promises with Viggo Mortensen, top Russian mob movie. If you're talking about Puerto Rican organized crime, it would have to be Carlito's Way with Al Pacino. That was an excellent movie.
Yeah, I love that movie.
How about Black American gangster movies? To me, American Gangster with Denzel Washington and Russell Crowe. That was the top top Black American movie. Um, New Jack City with Mario Van Peebles and Wesley Snipes. That was a great African American movie about the whole crack scene in New York.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, my top Irish organized crime movie was Road to Perdition. And in my view, Jesse, I think Road to Perdition is as good as The Godfather. It really is. My background in Hollywood, I used to be a writer. I was a screenwriter, I was a television script writer, spent a lot of years in Hollywood doing all of that. And you can't tell me that Road to Perdition wasn't up there as being a top-notch, elegant. The music was beautiful, the photography, the acting, the characters, the story, everything about Road to Perdition to me is as good as any organized crime movie that you can talk about. So, the other thing too is before I forget, top gangster movies that are not Italian mafia movies. In my opinion, the top ones are Chinatown, number one. Number two, Heat. Number three, Bonnie and Clyde. Those were three really super great gangster movies that I really liked. So you asked me about my top eight. You want to hear that? Okay, I'll give you my top eight
All right.
Italian Italian mafia movies. Um, and then I'm going to give you the ones that I don't like.
Okay.
The mob movies that I don't like. The ones that I think are the top eight. Number eight, Bronx Tale. Number seven, The Untouchables. Number six, Casino. Number five, Donnie Brasco. Great movie. Number four, Mean Streets. Now, I like Mean Streets a lot because that really, really had a lot of Italian street stuff in it. It was really the first breakout movie for De Niro
Hmm.
and Harvey Keitel. That was Martin Scorsese's first big movie before Taxi Driver. Number three, I've got Goodfellas. A lot of real intense, Italian mafia stuff in there. Boy, you can't get away from that. Number two, Godfather 2. Number one, The Godfather. Those are my top eight. I've got to tell you though, there are there are other mob movies, mafia movies that I wasn't crazy about. As somebody who worked in Hollywood, who was a script writer, this is my opinion. These are the seven that I didn't like. Okay, you out there watching this, some of you are going to say, "Oh, you got me crazy. That was a great one. You got me nuts." Okay, for me, number seven, I did not like. I didn't like Pulp Fiction. Okay, that's a crime gangster movie, not too much embedded with crime and gangsterism, but the two leads, Travolta and Jackson, they were mob guys, but I didn't like something about the excessive violence and a lot of the sexual situations in there didn't didn't sit well with me. That's my opinion. You may think otherwise.
Right.
Number six, I didn't like that much was The Irishman. I thought it was too long, too long.
Yeah, it
Beautifully
was.
shot and all of that, just way too long.
Yeah, it was really
Uh,
long. It was.
Black Mass. Black Mass was another one with Johnny Depp. Just didn't like how it flowed. The characters. I don't like watching characters that are the same person from start to finish. They have no arc to them. They don't change at all. And then Whitey Bulger certainly never changed in his life.
Right.
Number four, I didn't like the Gotti movies. I didn't like the ones with John Travolta or the one with Armando Santi. Um, they, they they didn't work with me. I could go on a little while about that, but I'm not going to. Uh, I think a lot of you would agree with me that David Chase's movie, Gary Chase is the producer and creator of The Sopranos. He did The Many Saints of New York. Boy, that thing laid an egg. Was
Hmm.
not was not a favorite in my book in any way, shape, or form. Pretty boring and drawn out. Not much to it. What it was just not well written. The Departed was huge cast, big stars, Scorsese, everybody. Me didn't like it. I just didn't. I didn't get a feel for the mob life from that movie as much as Scorsese tried to. And the number one that I didn't like, a lot of you people out there, especially the guys, you can say you're crazy, you're nuts. To me, it was Scarface. Just did not like it that much at all. Yes, it was interesting to watch, seductive, Pacino, all of this business. I want to show you my little friend. No, all of that business. That was interesting. But like Johnny Depp with Whitey Bulger, um, uh, Al Pacino's character is the same from start to finish. There's no arc to the character. There's nothing interesting to it. It's a movie really for guys. There's probably not one woman out there that would say, I want to sit down and watch Scarface. So that's my opinion. Take it or leave it. I'm
Right.
giving you I'm giving you my inside baseball Hollywood sort of take on things. As somebody who used to be around the business, he used to be who's been around the media. That's just my personal opinion. What else I was going to bring up, Jesse, was a lot of these movies came from books.
Right.
And
Yep.
to me, I've got my top five mafia books that I recommend to everybody. If you haven't read these books, okay, number five to me would be the book called Rico. It's written by Chris Kerr and Joe Wolfinger. These two guys were ex-FBI agents who wrote about the life and the story of H. Paul Rico, an FBI agent that had eventually had he was involved with Whitey Bulger. People accused him of fingering Roger Wheeler, this businessman in Oklahoma, to get killed. They blamed him for it. This is the book about H. Paul Rico, who worked a little bit with my father, believe it or not, in the Miami office. The two of them for a short time. They worked together. Sometimes they would go down to the track and they would check out the mob guys there. And my father had a lot of very, very good things to say about H. Paul Rico. Did not think in any way, shape, or form that Paul Rico needed to be arrested at the age of 82 or so. And several months later, he wound up dying
Hmm.
in prison, shackled to his hospital bed because he had a heart condition. So it's an excellent book. The other one is Donnie Brasco. Donnie Brasco, top book. To me, Donnie Brasco is the book that really, really gets you inside the minds of these mobsters and the whole life. It was such a dangerous story. And Joe Pistone, the guy who was AKA Donnie Brasco, was an amazing FBI agent. He is a hero in my book. That's a book you should read. Donnie Brasco. The other is the Valachi Papers by Peter Moss. It's
Hmm.
about Joe Valachi, who became the first famous mafia stool pigeon, and it was all about his life. Another one is The Sicilian by Mario Puzo. That was an excellent book. It was a fiction book. It was about what happened after Michael Corleone left Sicily, and there was a mafia character that followed after him in his life. And number one, of course, to me, without a doubt, is The Godfather, the book. If you have not read The Godfather by Puzo, you've got to pick it up. It's a great read. It's a real page turner. The really cool thing about it is there are so many characters in the Godfather book that are not in the movie. They didn't put it in the script because it would have been too long. So those are my top five Italian mafia books. I really really enjoyed them. Before we go, I'm going to give you something interesting. Did you know that the movie The Godfather and the TV show Sopranos surprisingly were not liked that well in Italy? Did you know that?
I didn't know that.
Uh,
I've never heard that.
In Yes, in Italy, they have a term that they use, an adjective. It's called Americanata. Americanata. It means something that tries to be European or sophisticated, but doesn't succeed. And they apply that to Italian Americans. Okay, Italian Americans, but through the Italians in Italy, they're not seen as being that elegant or polished or even real Italians. You ask any Italian that moves to New York, they'll tell you that spaghetti and meatballs, that's not real Italian food. They'll tell you that. The Sopranos, the Sopranos was the quintessential cultural product from America. It was hated by the Italians. The Italians could not identify with the Sopranos family. They didn't know what to make of them. And the Godfather, the movie The Godfather, well, it did fairly well at the box office. It really did, but it never got good critical reviews because it was seen as this from the cultural establishment there, the intelligentsia is not being really kosher, you know, or not to be promoted as something that is really Italian. Interesting, right?
That's interesting. I didn't know that. I've never heard that. I would have thought that, The Godfather and The Sopranos are different. They're from different periods. I would have thought maybe The Godfather would have went over a little better in Italy, just because of when it took place and the way the movie kind of depicts the characters. The Sopranos, I can kind of see why Italians, wouldn't be as favorable for that TV show.
Right, right. I just came back from Italy, Jesse. I was there for 3 weeks, had a fantastic time. But you will pick up, as an Italian American, I maybe I'm over exaggerating, but I do pick up that they don't view Italian Americans as being exactly the same as them. We're sort of like what I would call fugazi Italians, like fake Italians. I sort of picked that up from them. Yeah, they're very, very hospitable, very friendly, but they don't consider Italian Americans as being European enough, as I mentioned before, sophisticated enough. So that enters into it.
Well, Gary, I appreciate you coming on here. I've enjoyed it.
Well, I enjoyed it too. Looking forward to coming back again if you'll have me. I'll make you an
Anytime.
offer you can't refuse.
All right. Yeah, anytime, man. My channel is open to you anytime. I know we've got some other things we've talked about discussing, so we'll definitely be getting together in the future.
Okay, Jesse, you hang in there. Thank you.
All right, folks, thanks for checking out this video. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel and keep following American Made. I appreciate it.